Take your hands off me before every one of you ends up on your knees begging for forgiveness. Crash. A crystal glass slipped from the hand of a female billionaire, shattering across the polished marble floor. At that exact moment, two bodyguards, both nearly 7 feet tall, had just violently slammed a homeless-looking man to the ground in the most luxurious ballroom in all of Manhattan. 3,000 guests, powerful CEOs, world-famous celebrities, politicians wearing watches worth millions of dollars, every single one of them turned their heads. Because never in the history of America's elite society had a beggar ever dared to walk into the private bride selection gala of the 7th richest man in the United States. Throw him out. His clothes are dirtier than the people sleeping outside Grand Central. This place is for the elite. Laughter erupted across the grand hall. The man lay on the freezing marble floor, atornquote, shoes so worn out his toes were visible, hair covered in the dust of the streets, a thin stream of blood slowly running from the corner of his mouth. But strangely, he wasn't angry. He didn't fight back. He simply smiled. A calm, unsettling smile, so calm that a few people suddenly felt a chill run down their spine. Then, he pushed himself up. Step by step, he walked straight toward the stage, under the mocking eyes of 3,000 people, until finally, he grabbed the microphone from the host's hand and said only 2 words. Stop. Now. No one understood why, but the massive ballroom, thousands of square feet of wealth and power, fell completely silent. In the very next second, the homeless man lifted his head. His eyes were sharp, cold, like a king who had never bowed to anyone. Then he said one sentence that left all 3,000 guests frozen in place. The man who paid for tonight's event is me. 1 second, 2 seconds, then the giant LED screen behind him suddenly lit up. Names appeared across the golden light. Blackstone, Morgan Stanley, Jefferson Global Technologies, and on the final line, founder and chairman, Daniel Jefferson, the 7th richest man in America. The entire ballroom didn't make a single sound. In Nigeria, the Yoruba have a saying, the person who judges a man by his clothes is often blind to the truth. So if you're listening to this story today from Lagos, Abuja, Ibadan, Kano, or anywhere else in the world, leave the name of your city in the comments. And if you believe character is always worth more than money, subscribe right now. Because what happened after Daniel Jefferson removed that torn hat made all 3,000 people in that room cry. The October night wind swept between the glass towers of Atlanta. Golden lights reflected across the elegant streets of Buckhead, the neighborhood where only the wealthiest could truly claim they belonged. On the top floor of the building bearing the logo of Jefferson Dynamics, Daniel Jefferson stood alone before a floor-to-ceiling wall of glass. 42 years old, a self-made billionaire, a man worth more than $8 billion, owner of private jets, a 130-foot yacht, and luxury properties stretching from New York City to Los Angeles, the man America's financial world called only one thing, the steel lion of Peachtree Street. But that night, there was no conqueror's coldness left in his eyes, only exhaustion. On his walnut desk, 3 wedding rings, 3 marriages, 3 betrayals. The first woman had loved his stocks. The second had loved his mansion. The third had loved the Jefferson name more than the man himself. Daniel tightened his grip around a glass of whiskey. His eyes darkened. Then he spoke to his most trusted assistant, Michael. Do you know what the most expensive thing in this world is? Michael remained silent. Daniel smiled bitterly. It's not money. It's a real heart. The room fell into silence. A few seconds later, Daniel set his phone down on the desk. His voice dropped lower. Tomorrow, I disappear. Michael thought he had heard wrong. Sir? Daniel turned around, his eyes sharp as blades. No bodyguards. No secretary. No private jet. No one finds out. I want to see. If I had nothing left, who would still see the man I really am? The next morning, Wall Street was in shock. The CEO of Jefferson Dynamics had vanished. Phone turned off. Private jet untouched inside its hangar. His mansion on the hill locked tight. News spread across every major American media network. But somewhere else in Atlanta, no one knew that a man wearing a faded old coat, shoes with worn-out soles, was sitting alone outside a train station. a rough beard, hair covered in dust. No one recognized that the man holding a paper cup for spare change was actually Daniel Jefferson. People walked by. Some looked at him with disgust. Some avoided eye contact. Some tossed a few coins onto the ground, as if they were giving charity to something worthless. Daniel said nothing. He simply watched. Every stare, every fake smile, every piece of coldness this world had to offer. Until the rain began to fall, Atlanta disappeared behind a curtain of white. People rushed for shelter. Only he remained, soaked, silent. And then, a pair of white shoes stopped in front of him. Daniel looked up. Standing before him was a young woman about 26 years old, healthy brown skin, hair neatly tied back, a simple service uniform, and on her chest, a small name tag. Emily Brooks. She didn't look at his torn clothes. She didn't look at the paper cup. She didn't look at the coins scattered on the ground. She looked straight into his eyes, as if she were looking at a human being, a real human being. Then, she knelt down in the rain, placed a warm umbrella into his hand, along with a small bag of food, and smiled. I don't have much, but no one should have to eat dinner alone in the rain. In that moment, the heart of Daniel Jefferson, a man who had never bowed before any business deal, suddenly trembled, because for the first time in many years, someone saw him, not as wealth, not as fame, not as the Jefferson name, but as a human being. And Daniel had no idea that the young woman standing in front of him. October rain poured over New York City like a cold gray curtain. Raindrops hammered endlessly against the streets, neon signs, and glass windows of towering skyscrapers, where billions of dollars changed hands in mere seconds. But at the edge of a small park near Central Park, a man sat curled up on an old wooden bench, a coat worn thin at the shoulders, a rough, unshaven beard, shoes covered in mud. No one could have imagined that the man trembling in the freezing wind was actually Daniel Jefferson, founder of Jefferson Dynamics, a man who once signed $100 million deals with nothing more than a nod. But for the past 2 weeks, no bodyguards, no private jet, no $1 million watch, not a single person calling him Mr. Jefferson. Daniel was living like a real homeless man. During the day, he sat among the rushing crowds, watching polished leather shoes walk right past him. At night, he curled up beneath freezing awnings, listening to car horns, subway trains, and the city that never sleeps. He had been thrown out of stores, knocked to the ground by security guards for standing too long outside a coffee shop, had empty soda cans thrown at him by teenage boys who laughed as they walked away. Get lost, you freeloader. Every word, every stare, cut like a knife. And for the first time in his life, Daniel understood what it felt like to be invisible. That afternoon, the rain came down even harder. The icy wind cut straight through his skin. Daniel sat hunched over on the wooden bench, his hands trembling from hunger. For nearly 20 hours, he hadn't eaten a thing. The crowds kept moving, hundreds of faces, hundreds of eyes, but not one person stopped, until a pair of small white shoes came to a stop right in front of him. Daniel slowly looked up. Standing before him was a young woman, about 28 years old, brown hair neatly tied behind her head, a simple cream-colored dress, already soaked by the rain. No designer labels, no jewelry, no heavy makeup, only her eyes, warm in a way that felt almost unreal. She didn't wrinkle her face. She didn't avoid him. She didn't pull out her phone to record a video. Instead, she quietly knelt down until she was eye level with him. Then she opened a paper bag that was still giving off warmth. A sandwich, a cup of coffee. She gently placed them into his hands. Small hands, but warm, so very warm. Then she smiled. A smile so pure, it made even the rain seem to slow down. Please eat. It's really cold. Just 5 simple words. Yet they made Daniel Jefferson, the man who had faced Wall Street without ever trembling, grip that sandwich so tightly his hands began to shake. His throat tightened. His eyes turned red. Because after so many years, for the very first time, someone had come close to him, not for money, not for power, not for the Jefferson name, but simply because he was cold. And Daniel had no idea that the young woman standing before him would become the most important decision of his entire life. On the seventh night, the sky above Atlanta glowed as if it had been painted in gold. From miles away, people could already see the crystal lights shining from the legendary The Street Regis Atlanta, the place the media was already calling the most luxurious gala in America this year. 3,000 guests, powerful CEOs, world-famous celebrities, politicians wearing watches worth more than entire apartments, hundreds of beautiful women, dressed in sparkling evening gowns. Everyone believed that tonight, Daniel Jefferson, founder of Jefferson Dynamics, the wealthy, cold, and powerful man, would choose the woman who would step into his life. Outside the hotel, dozens of reporters packed the entrance. Camera flashes fired nonstop. Everyone was waiting for Daniel's familiar limousine. But 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes passed, and still, he didn't appear. Inside the grand ballroom, symphony music echoed beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter filled the air. Whispers spread from table to table. I heard Daniel's announcing his engagement tonight. I heard he already chose a supermodel from California. No, I'm hearing it's a senator's daughter. Soft laughter rippled through the room. And then, at that exact moment, the grand doors of the ballroom slowly opened. The night wind swept inside. Every eye in the room turned at once. And in the very next second, the entire ballroom froze. No limousine, no bodyguards, no designer tuxedo, no diamond watch. Only a man wearing a faded old coat, ripped jeans, shoes covered in dust, messy hair, a rough beard. He looked no different than a homeless man who had just walked out of a train station. 1 second of silence. Then laughter exploded. At first, only a few people. Then, the entire room. Where's security? Who let this guy in? Oh my God, this is a party for the elite. One man raised his champagne glass and laughed loudly. Maybe he got lost looking for the back kitchen. Laughter erupted again. Some women covered their mouths. Others even stepped back, as if they were afraid his clothes might stain theirs. Then from the center of the crowd, a woman in a red gown stepped forward. Perfect beauty, diamonds wrapped around her neck. She looked Daniel up and down, her eyes filled with contempt. Then she said one sentence that made the entire ballroom burst into laughter. This man isn't even worthy of standing among us. The air seemed to freeze, but the man didn't get angry, didn't react, didn't explain. Daniel Jefferson simply remained silent, his eyes calm, colder than steel. He slowly walked past each group of guests, studying every face, every smile, every greedy glance, every fake expression, as if he had waited his entire life for this moment. Then suddenly, Daniel stopped. In the middle of that sea of luxury, among diamonds, among the scent of expensive perfume, his eyes trembled ever so slightly, because at the far corner of the ballroom, a young woman stood alone, a simple cream-colored dress. No jewelry, no need for attention, no effort to impress anyone. She simply stood there, as if this place didn't belong to her. Daniel recognized her instantly. Those eyes, that smile, that warmth. She was the young woman from the rain in New York City, the one who had handed him a warm sandwich, the young woman named Emily Brooks. But what made Daniel stand completely still wasn't the fact that she was there. It was because, unlike everyone else in that ballroom, Emily didn't laugh. She didn't judge. She didn't step away. She simply began walking toward him, while all 3,000 guests watched in stunned silence. And then, in the most luxurious ballroom in Atlanta, she gently removed the shawl from her shoulders and placed it around Daniel, then softly whispered, "You still haven't had dinner, have you?" And in that exact moment, the entire ballroom, the gold-covered ballroom of the Street Regis Atlanta, shimmered beneath the dazzling glow of hundreds of crystal chandeliers. The violins were still playing. Champagne glasses were still clinking. The laughter of 3,000 people, members of the most powerful class in America, still filled every corner of the room. But in that moment, everything suddenly seemed to slow down. Because in the middle of a crowd staring at Daniel Jefferson as if he were nothing more than a joke, only one person stepped forward. Emily Brooks, 28 years old, wearing a simple cream-colored dress, no diamonds, no designer labels, no bodyguards, no spotlight, only her eyes, so warm that they somehow made that entire luxurious ballroom feel cold. Emily walked forward, one slow step at a time, ignoring the thousands of eyes fixed on her, ignoring the whispers beginning to spread. What is she doing? Oh my God. Is she really about to touch that homeless man? How embarrassing. But Emily never stopped. She walked straight toward Daniel, the distance between them, only a few inches now. And in that moment, Daniel looked up. A rough beard, hair covered in dust, an old coat, worn thin at the shoulders. He looked exactly like a homeless man. But Emily didn't see the clothes, didn't see the dirty shoes, didn't see the mocking faces all around them. She looked only into his eyes. Just like that rainy day in New York City, when the whole world had walked past him, and she had been the only one who stopped. Then, to the shock of all 3,000 guests, Emily slowly removed the white shawl from her shoulders. A simple shawl, no logo, no brand, not worth as much as the champagne glasses in the hands of the guests around them. And yet, she gently placed it over Daniel's shoulders, every movement slow, careful, as if the man standing before her wasn't homeless at all, but the most important person in the world. Then she softly asked, in a voice so quiet, only Daniel could hear it, "Are you okay?" Just 3 words, soft as the wind. And yet, those 3 words made the heart of the man who had shaken Wall Street tremble. 1 second of silence. Then the entire ballroom exploded with laughter. Laughter echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers. She's lost her mind. Well, I guess they really are from the same world. Looks like a fairy tale for beggars. A woman in a red gown even shook her head with a mocking smile. How touching. The romance of the homeless. The laughter grew louder. But Daniel couldn't hear any of it anymore. A ringing filled his ears. His throat tightened. Because in 42 years, for the very first time, someone had asked him a question. Not, how much are you worth? What companies do you own? Do you have a private jet? What kind of life can you give me? But simply, are you okay? Daniel's hands slowly tightened around the shawl. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't luxurious. It carried no famous label. And yet, it felt warmer than any custom-made suit he had ever worn. And then, the man worth more than $8 billion, the man who had never bowed before any business deal, the man who had walked through 3 marriages without shedding a single tear, began to cry. Not the tears of weakness, but the tears of a man who had finally found what he had been missing his entire life. Daniel looked up at Emily, his eyes red, his lips trembling. Then he smiled, a real smile. Because in that exact moment, he finally understood money can buy houses, power can buy obedience, fame can buy admiration, but $8 billion still cannot buy a real heart. The inside of the Street Regis Atlanta had become so silent. You could hear the ice cubes gently striking the sides of crystal glasses. 3,000 people. 3,000 custom-tailored suits worth tens of thousands of dollars. 3,000 luxury watches. 3,000 faces that had once believed they were wise enough to judge a person's true worth. But in that moment, not a single one of them could speak. Because in the most magnificent ballroom in all of Atlanta, the man they had just laughed at, the man they had just called a beggar, the man they had treated like a stain among the elite, was now slowly walking toward the stage. Daniel Jefferson. No one called his name. No one stopped him. No one understood how a homeless man could walk past dozens of bodyguards without being stopped. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Clack, clack, clack. Each step felt like it was pounding directly against the pride of everyone in that room. The woman in the red dress frowned. An older businessman standing in the front row tightened his grip around his champagne glass. A few women exchanged nervous glances. Something was wrong. Daniel climbed each step to the stage. Not rushed, not afraid, not explaining. He stood beneath the golden lights, between the giant LED screens, under the suspicious gaze of 3,000 people. And then, he raised his hand and gripped the old coat hanging from his shoulders. The same coat that had sheltered him beneath cold awnings in New York City, the same coat that had endured rain, cold, and the contempt of the world. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then Daniel slowly took it off. The entire ballroom held its breath. The coat fell to the floor, and underneath was a perfectly tailored black suit Every line sharp as a blade. Every detail so flawless that anyone with an eye for fashion understood in an instant. This wasn't something bought in a store. This was made exclusively for power. Daniel raised his hand, wiped the dust from his face, removed the fake beard, ran his fingers through his hair. And in that moment, the homeless man disappeared. And standing in his place was the face that had appeared on hundreds of covers of Forbes, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal, Daniel Jefferson, founder of Jefferson Dynamics, a man worth more than $8 billion. But the real shock had only just begun. Behind him, the giant LED screen suddenly lit up. The first image appeared. A massive mansion overlooking Buckhead, 4-meter iron gates, an infinity pool, a private helipad. Whispers began spreading across the room. The second image, a white yacht over 40 meters long, floating in the Mediterranean Sea. Several guests widened their eyes. The third image, a private jet marked J and the Edna. Some guests dropped their champagne glasses. Then, the screen changed again. Financial magazine covers, billion-dollar numbers, historic business deals, headlines praising his success. And finally, a portrait of Daniel Jefferson. The entire screen lit up in gold. His name appeared in giant letters. Daniel Jefferson, founder and CEO. Jefferson Dynamics. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The entire ballroom stood frozen. No music, no laughter, no whispers. Only a terrifying silence. The woman in the red dress turned pale. The crystal glass slipped from her hand. Crash. A CEO in the front row stepped backward. Some people simply couldn't believe what they were seeing. This can't be. Oh my God. We just laughed at Daniel Jefferson? A few women forced awkward smiles. Some guests started moving forward to shake his hand. Others adjusted their hair. But it was already too late. Daniel didn't look at them. Didn't look at the people who had mocked him. Didn't look at the eyes that had suddenly changed from contempt to admiration. He looked at only one person, Emily Brooks, standing quietly in the corner of the ballroom, her eyes red, her hands trembling. The shawl she had just placed over Daniel's shoulders was still there. Daniel stepped down from the stage. Step by step, slowly, steadily, 3,000 people instinctively moved aside, as if a path had just been created. For one heart, Daniel stopped in front of Emily and looked at her, not with the eyes of a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who had finally found where his heart belonged. Then, in front of all 3,000 people, Daniel dropped to one knee. The marble floor echoed beneath him. The entire ballroom held its breath. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a black velvet box, opened it. Inside, a diamond ring shining like a star. Emily covered her mouth. Tears began streaming down her face. Daniel looked up at her, his voice low, rough, but every word echoed through the entire ballroom. 3,000 people here only saw my clothes. He paused. His eyes turned red. But only you saw the man inside. Emily broke into tears. Daniel tightened his grip on the ring, then spoke the words that made many people lower their heads in shame. Will you love a man, even if one day he has nothing left? Tears fell from Emily's eyes onto the marble floor. She didn't look at the ring. She didn't look at the screen. She didn't look at the $8 billion fortune. She looked only at Daniel, at the man who once trembled in the rain. When she handed him a warm sandwich, and through trembling tears, she nodded. Just one nod. Yet it made the entire ballroom stop breathing. Daniel cried. Emily cried. And for the very first time, all 3,000 people standing in that room understood a truth that money could never buy. That a person's true worth is not in the car they drive, not in the house they live in, not in the watch they wear, not in the numbers inside their bank account, but in the heart they carry when they have nothing left.